Welcome to today's edition of the Weapons of War podcast. And as usual, I'm your host, Eden Tronde. Today, we are looking at a law that was signed in Uganda recently. That's about 2 months ago. On April 29th, 2026, the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act 2026 was signed into law in Uganda, effectively putting Uganda on the same path as Germany, a path leading back to the Stone Age era. How and why is what we are going to look at today. And on April 29th, 2026, this is a post on the State House of Uganda X page. And in bits, it read, also assented to, because on that day, yes, the president assented to so many, signed off so many other laws, but also assented to were the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act 2026, introducing mandatory energy standards and audits and regulation of inefficient technologies. That's what the statement read on the State House X page. But you may ask, why was this brought up? Why was there a need for the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act? On the surface, it's obvious who doesn't need energy efficiency or who doesn't need conservation. But usually, the devil is not in the wording. Like I've always told you, that these globalists, these entities that usually come up with these agendas, they are very good at branding. They are very good at coining words: build back better, the great reset, the new normal. Those, just to mention a few of the phrases they have coined recently. The future we want. They coined these so many beautiful, phrases that you cannot argue against. So even here, when they come and say the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, who will resist or stand up against efficiency and conservation? Of course, no one. But let's dig the details. So why, you'd wonder, is this even necessary? Like I've mentioned already, there is an ongoing global move to replace the traditional sources of energy that we've been used to, with renewables that are called cleaner energies. Why? Because apparently the traditional energy sources we are used to are not environmentally friendly. And in this era of global boiling, where everything's about fighting climate change, those traditional energy sources have to be done away with in favor of the renewables. Hence, the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act. But not only in Uganda, it's on a global scale, like I'll show you later. So, because of this goal to reduce, greenhouse, emissions in the atmosphere, there is this move for solar and preference for solar, preference for wind. But we know that those renewables also come with their own pitfalls, unreliability being just one of them. But again, you wonder, so how does how does this tie into climate change? Again, just to jog your memory a bit, we talked about net zero, the rush to net zero. Net zero is just a concept that was coined by, again, the same entities fighting climate change. Apparently, by 2050, to ensure that globally the amount of emissions in the atmosphere also equal to the conservation measures that we put in place to remove the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That if globally we emit say 10 million or a billion, kilograms of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, we also have equally the mitigation measures in place to remove that very quantity of carbon dioxide or greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. Hence, net zero. So everything that they are doing today, everything that is being implemented globally is geared towards that net zero. And energy has been identified as one of the major sectors to tackle, to rejig, to adjust. But this is not mere an adjustment. This is an energy transition we are talking about. And in terms of a transition, I'm saying this is a major surgery. It's not mere a procedure. So what we are going to look at here today is, how is this going to affect you? How is this going to reach your doorstep and even inside your living room? Just snippets from the act that I was able to read. They say the purpose of the act is to regulate the efficient and rational use of energy in Uganda. So in essence, there is an inefficient use and irrational use of energy in Uganda. So enhance, and also this is to enhance and promote energy efficiency and conservation in Uganda, and avoid wasteful use of energy, and ease the burden of energy costs on the economy and the environment. Like we'd imagine anything to do with energy, this is going to affect several sectors, some of which are mentioned in the act. It's affecting the cooking technologies, it's going to affect the transport sector, the buildings. And when I say buildings, you're looking at hotels, you're looking at hospitals, you're looking at schools, you're looking at factories, shopping malls, plazas, even your house, apartments, everything. And it's also the other sector looked at here is agriculture, and also the other sector is appliances. By appliances, I know many of us are used to domestic appliances, flat irons, TVs, microwaves, cookers and all, refrigerators. But by appliances, we also mean machinery. So this is also going to affect factories. When we talk about appliances, what machinery is a factory X using to produce its goods? Are those machineries being used energy efficient? Are they environmentally friendly? Or they are some of these culprits that are emitting, they are part of the culprits that are emitting, numerous greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Anyway, the act also continues to say that there will be energy audits, like you'd expect. A designated energy consumer shall undertake energy audits to identify areas where energy is used ineffectively or where energy saving measures can be implemented. A report of the energy audit shall be submitted to the minister together with the plans for implementing the energy audit within a period prescribed by the regulations. So the energy audits shall include an assessment of the energy consumption, energy efficiency measures, potential cost saving, and recommendations for improvement. So if you factory, you have to do this. You have to implement your own, audit as per the law. How efficient are your appliances in regard to energy efficiency? How updated are they? And are there any other measures you can put in place to ensure that your energy consumption is in line with environmentally friendly, measures today? The minister will also recognize designated energy consumers that comply with requirements of energy efficiency and conservation under this act and issue them a certificate of recognition. But perhaps to pause here a bit, how do you think this will affect the sector? Say, if we are looking at a factory, so to say, and its appliances have been found to be non-energy efficient, all outdated and not environmentally friendly in the way that they work. How do you think that will affect that factory? The factory will immediately or be required to phase out the old machinery or old appliances and update it with new appliances. And that will increase operation costs of the factory or the manufacturer, in spite of the fact that these appliances that are now termed outdated have been functioning well and producing well. And what if they just even bought their plants last year or 2 years back, and perhaps it has a warranty of 5 years and it has a lifespan of 15 years? No, you are required to put it aside and get a new one that is energy compliant. So as they increase the operation costs on the manufacturer who is required to change their appliances, what do you think that will do to the final cost that you will have to pay, the final price that you will have to pay for the goods and services? As the operation costs increase, the selling price increases, and therefore you have to fork out more money for certain goods and services. But let's continue. We are going to, there are so many sectors that are being, affected by this Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act. But for today, we are going to look at, let's first look at the transport sector. They say that the sub-headline was fuel economy and vehicular emissions. Vehicular means emissions from vehicles. A person shall not import into or sell a motor vehicle trailer or engineering plant in Uganda unless the motor vehicle trailer or engineering plant complies with the fuel economy standards. Fuel economy standards issued by Uganda National Bureau of Standards in consultation with the minister. By fuel economy, we mean the efficiency of a vehicle or system in terms of the distance traveled per unit of fuel consumed. Therefore, there's going to be a promotion of vehicles or machinery that consumes far less fuel and while producing efficiently. That if it's a car, they are going to opt for cars that produce less fuel and move perhaps longer distances. Those are the cars they are going to opt for. Why are they opting for that? Because they say these are, climate change, enthusiasts. They say that fossil fuels have to be phased out because they are dangerous to our environment. Therefore, in phasing out the use of fossil fuels, one of the areas to be touched are the cars. Therefore, they are going for the cars that are being imported here. They will be therefore more in favor of perhaps hybrid cars. Hybrid, those are the cars that use partly fuel and partly electricity. So, because they say electric cars are the future, the present future, because they're already here, but they're also in the future. So, they will be opting for such cars. Therefore, those who are bringing guzzlers, the huge cars, the Land Cruisers and all, you may face issues. Those who are bringing trucks, farm machinery, tractors and all, they may face issues unless those are hybrid or fully electric. So I'm trying to interpret this for you. And when they talk about vehicular emissions, this means pollutants released into the environment from vehicles. Therefore, and again, when they talk about pollutants released into the atmosphere by vehicles, that means the biggest culprit there are the cars that use diesel and petrol. Therefore, this law is coming for those cars. They are going to put regulations and standards on the cars to be brought in here in Uganda in favor of more of electric cars. How is that going to affect you? That's going to affect you that in due time, if they start with the importation, in due time they may say by this time, those who have petrol cars, perhaps you don't have to do what? You need to think about a plan of phasing it out or dropping it. That could come in the future because you are doing what? Fighting climate change. We are trying to conserve our environment. Therefore, but we understand that these cars are already in here. So what do? Yes, we stop the bleeding at the borders, but what do we do with the cancer that is within? How do we deal with it? Don't you think in future there will be also a way of trying to phase out the ones that are already within? How do you phase them out? Do you ration the fuel that they get per month, per year? How do you do that? Get, but you know that the end will not be only on managing the imports, but also on managing what's already within. That will be coming for you too. And then public transportation. The government shall provide incentives to the private sector to invest in public transportation infrastructure, such as buses and trains, in order to provide citizens with convenient and energy efficient alternatives to private cars. Now, the issue here that they're talking about incentivizing public sector to get into public transportation, like the Kira Motors who came up with its electric buses. So such investors will be incentivized, especially if they are producing electric cars. So, and again, why they are inviting public sector into this is in order to ensure that they are offering alternatives to private vehicles. I hope, my prayer is that there won't be a rush to eliminate private vehicles and put quotas that in these areas private vehicles are not allowed before there is enough, infrastructure in the public sector put in place. Because at times the enthusiasm overwhelms them and people may take on measures and they clamp on private vehicles before the public transportation is seamless. And yet, even if the public transportation is seamless, those that prefer to drive their own private vehicles should be allowed to do so. There should be freedom and liberty for someone to choose what to use instead of being forced and coerced into it. Then there will be the labeling of fuel economy and vehicular emissions. Now, this means that the people who are involved in the trade, importation of cars and selling of cars, will be required to have labels on their cars or machines, whatever you brought in, to label it, how much fuel it consumes, how efficient is this machine or car in terms of fuel consumption or energy consumption. That label has to be on. In terms of emissions, it has to show that this car emits this much per kilometer. So that those cars that are not environmentally friendly, that emit so much, will be left out of the country. So that also you have at times, perhaps even you, the buyer, those who are climate change, sensitive, you won't buy those cars or you won't buy that machinery. That's what labeling also means. That also come into play. But this will mainly affect the traders, those who, or the businessmen and women who are involved in this kind of market. And then the minister shall promote the establishment of electric charging stations through incentivizing, piloting, and demonstrations. A person shall not operate a commercial electric charging station without a license issued by the minister. So you see that there will be incentivizing the transition from the traditional energy consumption models that we've had into these renewables. They will be incentivizing them. Those who want to take part in that, perhaps you want to put up this electric charging station throughout the country or throughout a certain region, there will be incentives for such people. Therefore, where do you think those incentives will be coming from? Those incentives have to be catered for in the national budget. Now, if those incentives are catered for in the national budget, perhaps they will come in terms of a loan from the European Union or from the World Bank or the IMF, whoever we borrow money from. That money will have to come in so that so that the government incentivizes those who are participating in the economy, who are towing this line of energy efficiency and conservation. They will be incentivized, but that money has to come from somewhere. Therefore, this is adding a certain cost, humongous cost, on our national budget, because the transition from traditional energies to the renewables is not exactly a smooth one. It needs to be oiled. Therefore, we may take on a debt burden in order for us to facilitate the transition. How did Trump handle that? We see that on January 20th, 2025, Donald Trump, for him, signed an executive order dismantling the federal and state level electric vehicle policies, targeting the removal of consumer subsidies and the rollback of the emission standards. Before Trump came into power, in the Biden era, there were targets that were required by automakers of up to meet the threshold of up to 56% of new car sales to be electric by 2032. So car makers in the US were required by law that by 2032 to be able to make sales of electric vehicles of up to 56%. What did that mean? That means that they have to be highly incentivized to do that. There have to be a lot of promotions of electric cars, that they are good. If you're going to take someone off the car they are used to and give them something else, you have to promote it and prove it to them that it's better. And therefore, there are all these incentives that were given or that were being channeled into that venture. But when Trump moves in, he cancels it, because he has always said that this is a green scam. It's meant to run down economies. And Uganda is doing what? Uganda is taking exactly the opposite direction. And we also saw this from Sadiq Khan, the headline, Sadiq Khan to unite cities with call to ban new petrol and diesel vehicles. So this again to show you that these things that are being proposed in this Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act are not entirely new. They are being applied elsewhere. In the Biden era, we've seen that there was a promotion of electric vehicles, that automakers were required by law that by 2032 to be able to make 56% electric car sales. Now you see also here the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, also trying to ban petrol and diesel cars. So these are not new. These are global moves that are touching down here in Uganda. That's the bit about transportation. In terms of appliances, we also talked about the sector that's going to be affected. That's appliances. And by appliances, that means a domestic or commercial device designed to perform specific functions such as cooking, cooling, heating, or cleaning. So that appliance could be a home appliance or could be a factory appliance. So the minister shall designate appliances and equipment for which minimum energy performance standards apply. There will be minimum energy performance standard that any machinery that doesn't fall within has to be phased out. The minister shall update the minimum energy performance standards for the appliances and equipment. And the minimum energy performance standards shall be based on technologically feasible and economically justifiable levels of energy efficiency that result in energy saving. And in terms of the transition, how much time duration are people being given to switch from the way they have been consuming energy to adhere to the Act? According to the Act, notwithstanding any provision of this Act, any person using specified energy consuming technology before the commencement of this Act shall, within 1 year from the date of commencement of this Act, ensure that the energy consuming technology complies with this Act. Within 1 year from the time the Act rolls out is set in motion, within 1 year, people are expected to ensure that the energy consuming technology they have complies to the Act. So what do you think happens to a factory with, say, half of this machinery falling short of the minimum energy performance standards? You understand? What about the cars in the bond? What about appliances someone has at home or they have just installed in their hotel, all in their school? The school has been, had put out this, fundraising fund for like 3 years to buy a certain machinery, and now they have bought it, and then, after this Act and the new standards rolled out, that machinery is not energy efficient. Therefore, the school has to get rid of it, or the hospital has to get rid of this machinery that's not energy efficient. What do you think will happen in that case? And the transition is expected to be within 1 year from the date of the commencement of the Act. So you see that there's going to be a lot of disruption within the economy if at all this Act is implemented. Perhaps the disclaimer here is that we're in a country where at times the laws, we have so many laws that are not implemented. The implementation of the laws is another, issue altogether. So you'd hope that perhaps the implementation of this will take some time, but if it's within a year, how much disruption will that cause with people in the transport sector and the appliances sectors? You get the energy efficiency and standards shall be based on, they say, to be based on internationally recognizable benchmarks. So that means for me, if we are basing it on internationally recognizable benchmarks, I'll look at a country out there that tried to go down this route. And what happened to that country? You get all what's happening in that country. Of course, like I already mentioned, that most of these agendas come from somewhere else. They don't exactly come from Uganda. And there was this, a post by the UN, and they said that fossil fuel phase out is a precondition for the emergence of economic models that align with the right to a health environment. Fossil fuel phase out. This is about the phase out of traditional energy sources that we've used in favor of renewables or cleaner energies. And to achieve the health environment that we need, the phase out of these fossil fuels is a must. So this is what it's leading up to. They say 99% of the world is breathing at unsafe levels due to air pollution from sources such as burning fossil fuels. So there is this ongoing fight or attack on fossil fuels in favor of renewables. Updated global air pollution roadmap to cut deaths caused by poor air quality by 50%. by 2040. So they have also this goals by World Health Organization. But if they are going to cut the death due to air pollution, what then do you think is the first step to take? Phasing out of fossil fuels. That's what they're saying. But let us look at the case study of Germany that has been trying to implement these measures, phasing out or adapting this economic model. And here is I picked snippets from intensive research I made to look at what's happening in Germany. Germany aims to reach net greenhouse gas neutrality by 2045. It has set interim targets of cutting emissions by at least 65% by 2030 and 88% by 2040 compared to 1990 levels. Post 2050, Germany aims for net negative emissions by 2050. It wants to have less emissions and more conservation measures in place, removing more of the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So what has Germany done in that effect? Under Angela Merkel, she ordered the destruction of 17 nuclear plants, which produce 30% of Germany's electricity. Yes, those ones, get rid of all that energy. Though it has been said to be a bit clean, yes, again, they got rid of their energy system. All 17 nuclear plants were done away with. Germany shut down its final nuclear plant in 2023, which decision removed 4 gigawatts of reliable low-cost electricity from the grid. The plants were operational, and they were paid for, not in debt, and was still, there was no replacement capacity ready. Destruction of the existing is the easy part. An efficient replacement is another issue Germany is showing us here. Germany turned to intermittent wind and solar backed by gas imports and emergence coal restarts. So what have been the consequences after the destruction of the traditional energy sources in favor of the renewables? What have been the consequences in Germany? Yeah, Europe's biggest economy has been in recession for the past 2 years. Electricity prices surged, grid reliability weakened, and fossil fuel use actually increased. Now Germany's electricity costs are the third highest in the world, only behind UK and Japan. Because when they phased out the traditional, the renewables were not efficient enough to fill the gap. Therefore, there's a higher demand for electricity and less electricity supply, which led to high demand, less supply, leads to increased prices. They have the third highest cost of electricity behind UK and Japan. This led to the German industrial decline, some people are suggesting, often described as deindustrialization. This stemmed from the destruction or breakdown of this long-standing economic model in favor of the green economic model, the renewables economic model, cleaner economic models that Uganda is trying to adopt with the energy efficiency and conservation. Is a transition, is a transformation, is a major surgery on our energy sources that we've been used to in favor of renewables. But we are seeing what has happened to Germany. Between February 2022 and 2026, industrial output in Germany dropped by over 10%. And the country shed a quarter of a million manufacturing jobs. That's 250,000 manufacturing jobs were lost as energy-intensive sectors contracted sharply. Because as the prices of the energy increased and the energy was in short supply, people have to cut operation costs. What happens then? As they cut operation costs, there is laying off of staff. There is production below capacity. You get? And Germany's energy-intensive sectors like chemicals, metal, glass, paper have contracted sharply due to the soaring power and gas costs following the loss of cheap Russian supplies. Of course, this destruction of their nuclear plants also coincided with the Russia-Ukraine war. And what happened that Germany decided to stop importing the cheap gas from Russia, which also added pressure on the German industry. And one of the latest case studies has been the Volkswagen case study. And they say that the company in its 90th year faces existential threat. How the chief executive is considering cutting 100,000 jobs worldwide, around 16% of the network's global workforce, and closing three of the plants in Germany, as well as one Audi factory. Volkswagen, whose 10 brands range from C to Porsche, is already cutting 50,000 jobs in Germany by 2030, including 35,000 at its core Volkswagen brand. So we are seeing that the knock-on effect of transforming from these traditional energy sources to these renewables that are receiving global marketing, that are receiving enormous marketing and promotion is not exactly smooth. And Germany here is a case study. Let us look at the criticism here. There's a renowned professor here, Beckman and Schenck, who have sharply criticized Germany's energy transition and call for a suspension on wind and solar power. To quote, this is what they say. Overall, wind and solar account for only about 8% of our total energy needs. Yet, up to now, approximately 500 billion euros in subsidies have already been spent on this development. 500 billion euros have already been spent to transit from fossil fuels into these renewables. And the effect? Germany has built an extremely expensive system that, despite massive financial transfers, delivers neither competitive prices nor successful climate protection in international comparison. So they are poured 500 billion to transition from these traditional energy sources into these renewables. And the effect? What are they getting? Only 8% of their energy needs are being met by solar and wind. But there is also the CEO here, the managing director of one of their steel companies, Dostor. He points out that in the past, there were several energy changes, from water power to electric power, and from coal to oil to natural gas. And now, with decarbonization discussions, we are facing the question of exchanging natural gas. But for what? Because you're also seeing that solar and wind are not able to fill the gap. They are only meeting 80% of the nation's electricity needs, all energy needs. Yet the destruction of the 17 nuclear plants left a gap of 30%. So there is already a wide gap in terms of supply and the demand, which has driven up the prices, hence driving Germany's industry into the ground. And I love one of this blogger's perspectives. Again, one of the critics. He said, it's called Jamie Miller. He said that Berlin raised its own climate fund to pay for the climate policy it already bought. These climate policies that we are buying and adopting, they are costly. When the act here, the Energy Efficient and Conservation Act, talks about incentives, that means there's a kitty put aside for those incentives. Germany has already poured $5 billion into it. And the result, only 80% of the energy needs of the country are being met. And here, we are looking at what did Germany do. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz's government has announced it will cut more than $30 billion from the country's climate and transformation fund, a pot of money that was supposed to gently escort Germany into a spotless energy future. Heat pump subsidies are being restricted. Electric vehicle funding is being slashed. This is the German government doing what every government eventually does when the bill for its own enthusiasm arrives, quietly closing the tab and hoping nobody at the table notices whose signature is on it. The fund was built to finance Germany's exit from reliable conventional energy. Now, that very fund is being redirected to subsidize electricity prices for the households and industries who are drowning in the cost of the exit it financed. That is not an escape plan. That's not a rescue plan. That is a dog catching its own tail, biting it, and then applying for a grant to treat the wound. What German did, German had this kitty. It put aside these finances, put aside to help it transit from the use of these, reliable conventional energies to switch to renewables. But now, seeing what is happening in Germany, Germany is now touching this very kitty that that earmarked to transit to renewables to subsidize individuals and companies already choking under this move to renewables, this transformation to renewables. The regrets. The Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, has now admitted the shutdown was a strategic mistake, the shutdown of the 17 nuclear plants, calling Germany's energy transition the most expensive in the world. And that's the transition that Uganda is undertaking through this act, Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act. It's a transition from the conventional energy sources into these renewables. But the effects, we should not assume them. No, the effects are already here in Germany. It's a living example that we have today. European's biggest manufacturer now on its knees in a recession for the past 2 years. That's it for today. We shall continue to dissect the effects of this act and how it's going to reach your doorstep. Energy is the resource, it's the fuel that moves the economy. If it's disrupted, the entire economy feels the shock. There's a shock will reach right into your bedroom if this is implemented in its full weight. We hope it won't be. And we hope certain leaders will come up and revise these things or scrap it entirely. That's it for today.
Germany shut down its last nuclear power plants in 2023. That decision removed 4 gigawatts of reliable, low-cost baseload electricity. The plants were operational, they were paid for. And worse still, there was no replacement capacity ready. Germany turned to intermittent wind and solar backed by gas, imports, and emergency coal restarts. The obvious consequences followed. Electricity prices surged, grid reliability weakened, and fossil fuel use actually increased. Chancellor Friedrich Merz has now just admitted the shutdown was a strategic mistake, calling Germany's energy transition the most expensive in the world. A reckless bending to extreme green ideology traded reliability and prosperity for optics. Working nuclear plants were destroyed. And for what?